Hello everyone, in this video we are going to explain CSS media queries, and by the end of this video you are going to have all the necessary knowledge for about CSS media queries. And for start, I have prepared something, and as you can see in my HTML code, I have a div with a class of container, and there are 6 items inside this container, and each item has a p tag inside it with a class of content. A simple HTML code to start with. For the CSS part, well, the thing is, I have first of all applied some CSS properties, for example, like background color, like border color, so that you can see the area better. For example, this blue area is our container, and each one of these are our items. Well, if you like to understand all of these codes completely, well, at the end of this video, I am going to explain the other codes inside this. But for now, we are going to focus on media queries. And once I'm done with media queries, I come back to these codes for those who are interested and explain why I'm using, for example, a box sizing border box here, what that does, what does display flex do. But for a start, imagine that the only important thing that you need to know before we start talking about media queries is that I have assigned a flex display, and if you don't know what flex display is, I'll explain at the end of this video. But what happens is when I give a display flex to this container and I have applied a width of 50% to each item, what happens is that we have one div here, one div here, one div, one div, one div, one div here, because each one of these divs have a 50% width, and that's how they occupy the space. And of course, if we go ahead and change that 50%, for example, to 25%, what happens is we can hit refresh, and this is how 25% is, and this would be our result. Or we can go ahead, try out 33%, 50%, and things like that. But imagine that we, for example, a customer or the UI UX designer or someone want us to design something that for desktop has, for example, like each one of these tags have a 25% width, like what we had right here. And for example, for tablet has a 33% width. Maybe this is something, or maybe let's go for 33%. Okay, I think 33% for the desktop is good. So for the desktop, 33%, that's what they wanted us. For tablet and phones, they are going to have, for the phone, each one of these tags should have a, for example, a 100% width. For example, they wanted us to have a little less padding, so you can see the padding is too much for the desktop mode. So this is what we are going to do. So first we need to understand media queries. So for the syntax of the media queries starts with something like this. We say media, okay, and we specify the name of the media that you are going to use. Well, usually when we talk about media queries, the first thing that comes in mind is actually responsive design and working with the screen. And sure enough, like 95% of the time, 98, 99% of the time, we are using media queries for responsive design. But there are some circumstances, for example, print. We have media screen, we have media print. For example, we can control something to be visible in print, but not in computer, or the opposite, things like that. So we specify the name of the media that we are going to customize. For this example is actually a screen. We are going to, for example, say, let's use 1000 pixel. We want to say if the media screen, the width of the media that the user is visiting our website is bigger than 1000 pixels, something happens, and if it's smaller than, it's like an if statement. So media query is basically like an if statement. So let me first write it down. For example, I say media screen and, for example, let's use max width of 1000 pixel, and we write our brackets here. So what happens is, now we have our if statement. We are basically saying inside this if statement that we are just saying if a screen was smaller than 1000 pixels. So this is actually what we mean. So for example, here now we can just pass some selectors. It says for the maximum width of 1000 pixels, so it means if the screen was smaller than 1000 pixel, we can just use a selector. For example, I have already selected that inside my sections, and we can go ahead and apply a width of, for example, 50%. Okay, so and now if we come back here, hit refresh, see the result. Well, for the desktop, nothing changes because now the screen is not actually smaller than 1000 pixel. But there's a tool inside every browser, whether if it's Chrome or Firefox. You can hit inspect element or Control-Shift-I or F12 for that matter, and a inspect element tool will be opened. For some people, this inspect tool is on right, top right. You can choose that to top right, top left. Sorry, dock to right, dock to left, or you can dock it inside a new window, and that's what I do. And as you can see now, if you go inside this div here and inside each item, you can see the width of 33% has been applied, and there is no, we can see that 50% width nowhere. But if we click on this icon here, we can see we can turn on the responsive mode, and you can see now this is a iPad. The width of the device is 1024 pixels. So sorry, the width of the device is 768, which is actually smaller than 1000. So that's why we see that 50% width is applied. If we hit inspect element on this P, we can now see that this width 33% has been ignored, and this width of 50% is now applied to that. We can choose different devices from this menu, or we can go on responsive mode, for example, iPhone, SAE, and Pixels, so for example some devices, and or we can go on responsive and fully control the device with. And as you can see, as soon as, because I'm sure that you have a question in your mind, what about the 1000 itself? Well, we can try and see. For 1000 itself, it's using 50%, so it is for, so we can make our comment if it is smaller or equal to, smaller than or equal to 1000. So that's what it actually means, because we can see on the 1000 this is how it looks, and 1001 pixel we can see the properties are being changed. So basically this is media queries. Media queries are so simple, and we can just apply some CSS, some different properties to different selectors while we are coding. So this is the first thing about CSS media queries, because I wanted you to understand the syntax first. And now that we know the syntax, it's time for us to add some more, give you some more information about this media queries that we have. And now let's talk about this screen. So like 95% of the time, or even more, we are using screen in our media queries. But there are basically three types of media. One is speech, the second one is print, the third one is screen, and also we have a fourth one, which is all, which that all is actually all of these three together. When we say all, it means for all media. And let's start see, first of all, let's see the print, and we can see for example a media print. And for this one we do not have a and section because we are not specifying anymore, I think, because here when we said media screen, well we need to say what then, max width, min width. We have max width and we have min width, things like that. For the print, we can actually have some, for example, imagine that I have a span tag here. Okay, there's some more text inside this, and I am going to hide, for example, hide this thing in print mode. For example, let's give it a class of no print, For the moment, if we come here, hit refresh and hit Control P, when we are going to print this one, we can see that that some more text is there. Okay, but we can go ahead actually inside our CSS section and select this no print. Okay, and when we are in no print, just set the display of this element to none. Okay, what happens is we can come back here, hit Control P, and now sure enough we no longer see that. And the speech one is actually for screen readers, and I'm not going to talk about the screen readers, but the third media is actually to control you get the point. It doesn't matter whether the device is a screen or it's anything else. The point is we have a section that we can write some CSS code inside that. So we saw what max width is. We also have a min width as well. For example, if you want to use min width rather than max width, let's duplicate this one and comment this one so that you have these codes for yourself. And let's clean that section here so that we have that comment. And if we are going to use min width rather than max width, let's switch these two values. So this is another approach that we can have. So the width is on 50% as default for the load, but if the media is bigger than or equal to 1000 pixels, set the width to 30%. So for this time, the only difference is that what happens on 1000 pixels. So you can hit F12 again, and here you can see here when the thing is bigger, of course everything has a 33% width, and if we hit inspect on this item, we can see that 50% is ignored and now the 33% is applied. And sure enough, if you go to smaller, it goes like 50%, and even for the 1000 pixel, again the width of 33% will be applied. So this is they both correct and none of them is wrong. It just depends which one do you like more. So we have both max width and min width. But the point is, there's something that important that I want you to be aware of and be careful about, that the order matters. What do I mean by that? Well, let's imagine that we are going to have more than one media query. Well, for example, imagine that we are going to have a 100% width for items in mobile devices, and let's change that 1000 to 760. And for mobile devices, so everything smaller than so everything smaller than 760 will have that 100% width. But if it's bigger than 760, so of course it has a 33%. And I want to say that if it's bigger than, for example, 1080 pixels, so let's change both of them, both in the comment, and then I want to have a 50% width. So the thing is 100%, 33, and 50%. Okay. So if we come here and hit refresh and see the result, and go inside our inspect tool here, we can see that well, this Google Chrome, there's something that I am going to tell you guys. This tool from Google Chrome has some problems, this inspect tool. Sometimes in responsive design, you will have unexpected results while you're using it. That this is a bug from Chrome. Let's switch to Firefox quickly for this one. So for this browser, let's click on this icon, and as you can see, okay, this is working fine. We have 100% width for the mobile, and of course if we increase the width of this one, for example, let's put that on 900 pixels. So for 900%, of course, everything just fine. And of course, if you make that more than 1080, for example, 1200, of course, everything works fine. But when I said the order matters, if we write the order like this way we have a problem. If you take a look at it, for example, imagine that the width of the device is 1200. Okay, what happens? For 1200, first of all, the lines are executed line by line, and for the item, it goes ahead and applies a width of 100%. It says, sure enough, yes, the width is 100%. It says, okay. Comes here and the condition matches because the screen is 1200 and it's bigger than 1080. It says, okay, the width is not 100%. Okay, it's 50. It says, okay, yes. Then comes here, inside this, it says, if it's bigger than 7060, go ahead and the width, it says, okay, yes, the width is 33. So what happens is the width of the item goes to 33%. And that's not what we wanted. And that is actually a problem. Let's hit refresh. And as you can see, for now, for this, and now the width of the element that is bigger than that, if we hit inspect on this and go to this div, let's zoom in a little bit. You can see the width of this is ignored, and this ignored for that 1080, and this is applied. So that's why you need to be careful for the order, and the order matters. That's what I mean by it when I say the order matters. And of course, there's something that we forgot. Usually when you are using media queries, it's a good idea to have that meta tag that we had. For example, let's cut all of these. In VS Code, when you write HTML 5, it creates a structure for us. So we need to have this meta tag. When you are using media queries, never forget to use this meta tag, and because you will have unexpected results. So this is almost everything about media queries, and media queries are just as simple as it is. And in this video, I wanted to cover the most important stuff. And there are some other things that are not as frequently used as these things. For example, there's not selector. There's some weird stuff that we are going to check at the end of this video. But I think the only important thing that is remaining is that we can use actually multiple statements here. For example, for this media screen and min width, we can actually, for example, add another section. For example, the orientation of the device. For example, we can say and, let's type here and, let's have this, and the min width and max width is not the only thing. There's also something called orientation. And for orientation, we have two values, landscape, and portrait. I have a typo, it seems, landscape. Okay. It's for the mobile devices. When the orientation, they have the on portrait and landscape. We can have actually different CSS styles depending on the device orientation. And for this is not something that we can test out with our we can actually go ahead and test that out with this tool that we have here. For example, this is the device orientation here. We can see that the device orientation is also something that you could check. For example, we can apply some CSS for that and change the device orientation from there. And this is something that I just wanted to mention. And there are lots of other things that we did not cover. Not lots, just a few small things, actually, I believe the better word. But in this video, I wanted to cover the most important stuff and you understand the real deal. But there are some other stuff that they are not as useful as not frequent. I don't want to say use the word useful. I'm just gonna say they're not as frequently used as the things that I covered. These are the most important stuff. You know them, but if you're really thirsty for knowledge, if you are hungry for more knowledge, you can check out this page, and you can just search media queries. Media query CSS, just that is it. Media query CSS query. I have a typo. And inside that media queries list, this is a something from for usually W3 schools has a better documentation, but for this one, this developer Mozilla is, I think it's actually better. And you can check out the documentation that you can see there are actually some other stuffs that we can use, put comma between things. We can specify media only and not use the screen for that. It means the all. And this is it. This is the important stuff. We did cover important stuff, and this is it. I think we are good to go. And the last thing that I wanted to do in this video, because I was thinking there was something left I wanted to do, was at the beginning of the video I said I'm going to explain some of these CSS properties for those who don't know. What does display flex does, what does this box sizing do, why we do have that. So if you wanted to just know about understand the media queries, you're good to go. You can finish this video. But if you like to know more, I'm going to describe some of these CSS properties. So first of all, these paddings and border and background colors, the font size and font weight, they're obvious. Well, actually, the font size and font weight, it seems what we are doing, the background color, the padding, the margin. The thing that needs to be explained, first of all, this display flex is something that I'm going to explain. Well, when we apply display flex to something, unlike other displays, when we apply display flex, for example, to this container, well, we now are able to control the items that are inside this container, the children of this container. This item, this item, this item, those who are directly inside this container. We can control the behavior of them. Because without this display flex, the behavior was different. For example, let's have a quick thing here. For example, let's have a div here, give it a class of row, for example, row, and have some divs inside this, and this div 1, this div 2, okay, 2, and this is div 3, okay. And imagine that I have selected this div dot row. We're going to select this. Before we apply any CSS properties to this, we can see that the divs are stacked to get on top of each other. So that's short because div has a block display, and a block display items go under each other and they do not stay next to each other. When we apply a display of flex to this, what happens is when you hit refresh, you can see div 1, div 2, and div 3 are next to each other. So I applied the display flex to the row, but the behavior of its children changes. So that's something that you know. So we can actually go ahead and select every div that is directly inside this. This type of selecting is not good. You should actually apply classes to things. So that's what we are going to do. Class, let's say, for example, item. I have used item before, it seems. Say col for column, okay. So we can say dot col, okay, and we are going to now apply a width of 33%, okay, and give it a border so that you can see the area that it has, 3 pixel, for example, solid black, okay. If we come back here inside our CSS, you can see every one of them have a 33% width, and this is what happens. So what does that flex wrap do? Well, you see there's a problem with this display flex. If we go and assign a width of 50% to each one of these, you may think that we will have 2 divs here and the third one goes to the down. But when we hit refresh, we see no changes. Why is that? Well, the reason is the flex wrap for this display flex for default is on no wrap. And that's why when it's on no wrap, it forces everything to go inside one row and it doesn't let it break. So we can actually come here and set the flex wrap to no wrap. just like what we did here for this flex wrap. Sorry, set that to wrap, not no wrap. Set that to wrap, because this is what happens. If we come back here, and you can see this is what happened. But if you think again about it, we say, okay, the display was flex, right? The flex wrap is wrap. The width is 50%. So still, two of them should be on top, and the third one should go down. So why it's not happening? Well, it's because of something. Let's understand why is that. If I hit a 25% width for this, everything is great. You can see everything works fine. But as soon as I type 50%, what happens is, let's set inspect element on this one. And let's turn off the responsive design for this. This is how we turn off the responsive design. What happens is, okay, this div has a 50% width, right? Wrong, because the width of the div is actually a little bigger than 50% actually. Why? Because it has a 3 pixel border, and just because of that 3 pixel border, the width of the element end up being bigger than 50%. So if it's a little bigger than 50%, there is not enough space for the second div to go to next to that. And sure enough, if we remove this border, we can see everything's fine. But so in order to fix that, there's something called box sizing in CSS. In CSS, we have something called box sizing, and if we say the default value for box sizing is on content box. It means when we say, hey, for example, when we say width is 100 pixels. When we say the width is 100 pixel, the width of the element itself is 100 pixel. And if we apply margin, if we apply padding or border, the width will end up more than that. So if we set the box sizing to border box rather than content box, so when we say width 50%, it means we mean the width of the element itself with the padding around it and with the border that it has. Everything should be 50%. So that's what happens when you come here, hit refresh, and now the problem is solved. So I explained all of the codes, all the necessary codes that I used in this project. And so this is it. That's enough for this video, and hope to see you in my next ones.